Okay, welcome everyone to our latest interview. Today I'm joined by another amazing guest with years of experience across customer service, experience, and operations. In our chat, we'll be focusing on that tricky balance between tech and humanity, and how it relates to delivering great care that delights your customers. I think this is a super important subject that everyone is definitely trying to wrap their heads around as AI and automation tech continues to advance. As for that amazing guest, I am very thankful she has recovered in the past week and is able to join us. I'm joined today by Jessica Rose Garcia, Customer Experience and Support Manager at OneSkin. Jessica, I want to say hello to our audience today.
Hello, everyone. Hi to you, Chris. Thank you for that lovely intro and also for the well wishes. Yeah, I feel like everyone's sick. So hopefully everyone out there too, everyone's feeling great, feeling healthy. But yes, I'm Jessica Rose. I've been working in the CS and CX spaces for over a decade. And it truly is my first love. Like I say that all the time. I sleep it, I dream about it, I think about it. It really, truly is what I love to do. And currently, utilizing that skill set and learning more each day with OneSkin, which has been amazing. I've been there for about going on 2 months now, and it's been an amazing ride.
Yeah, and I love that we're getting you right as you've started a new endeavor, and we can dig. We'll certainly be digging into that throughout our conversation, how you're approaching that, especially in the lens of our broader conversation. And yeah, it's funny. I feel like we haven't had our full marketing team here at Zowie in weeks. The illnesses are striking everyone down. I will add before we hop into it, anyone who is joining us, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We'll either try to answer them during the conversation itself, or at the end we have some time slated away for Q&A with the audience. So please feel free to add anything there. And with that, yeah, let's hop into it. So Jessica, you mentioned you have years of experience. You're currently at OneSkin. Can you give us actually just a little bit more detail into some of those roles, some of the teams you've managed, and how you ended up where you are? Love that context.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked across a ton of different industries, a ton of different verticals. I got my start with a company called Quest Nutrition, which makes Quest bars very, very early on into that company being a startup, which kind of led me down this road of wanting to be in like food manufacturing, CPG, consumer packaged goods. And through kind of exploring those different areas, it made me realize I want to see some different verticals. And so that's what's kind of like led me through different funnels. And it's kind of been honestly like a very natural progression as far as where I've gone. And as far as OneSkin in general, I was back working in food manufacturing and CPG, and I heard about OneSkin and just fell in love with the company, the people, but also what we're trying to accomplish. So OneSkin, and if you're interested, give us a look. This isn't a plug, but it's really, really fascinating stuff. OneSkin.co. So we're a biotechnology longevity company that's really working to extend the amount of time, or health span is what we call it, the amount of time that people are in really, really good health. And the way that we're doing that right now is through a topical skincare. It's called OS01. It's a peptide. And it's just really fascinating stuff. Like the things that they're seeing, they're able to really make changes at the molecular level. And I'm not a scientist. And so for me, I'm like, wow, it's like when you send someone to the moon, you're like, wow, this is so interesting. Like, how are you doing this? It's super fascinating stuff. So super excited to be with that team. Tons of doctors, female founded. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I would also, to give you guys that plug, I would strongly suggest everyone go check it out. I have very cool looking stuff. Need to up my skincare as well here.
Got you.
Yeah. And you mentioned you were drawn by like the culture, and I'd actually curious, because you are new, what was kind of, as being hired as a senior leader, what are you kind of tasked to do? What was kind of the impetus behind this hire? What's like your edict here?
Oh man, I love it. That's a very great question. So OneSkin, experienced massive amounts of growth in a very short amount of time. So everything kind of got thrown at solving these customer service problems, and they hit a wall. Everything that they tried to do, it was just taking too long. There was so much going on. And again, they're all really, really smart. And they were like, this is not our expertise. So that's kind of what led to it. They wanted to find someone that did have that expertise. And we had mutual friends within the e-commerce space. So it kind of just naturally happened.
I love that. Need the
Me
expertise.
too.
Everyone has friends in the e-commerce space. We're finding that more and more. So
I know. We all know each other. It's a
yeah,
small but big pond.
amazing. Okay. Well, speaking of your expertise and bringing it back, let's hop into our topic. So, tech versus humanity, something every CS organization I think grapples with at the end of the day. You want to use tech to obviously maximize your team's efficiency, but you also want to make every customer feel like they are interacting with a human and valued. So quite simply, as a leader, how do you approach this dilemma on a day-to-day basis? How do you think about it?
Yeah, and and it's a really hot topic right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, still getting over this cold. Excuse me.
No worries.
It's such a hot topic right now. Like ChatGPT, right? Is like we hear that all the time. AI is being thrown around, like all of these different terms, and how can we kind of like implement them into our CS or CX ecosystems? And for me, I feel like it can be really overwhelming. Like you have competitors in the market, you have all of these different people coming at you, you're seeing things on LinkedIn, and you're essentially trying to evaluate, okay, which one works best for me, my brand, my company, my team. Because I do believe that tech and AI can not only make us more efficient, but they can actually amplify the human experience when looked at correctly and when built correctly. So for me, I like to start at the element of just keeping it simple, right? Like no matter what I'm looking at, whether or not it's tech or it's a human hire, like I look at them the same way. And that's through the lens of what are we trying to accomplish and how is this going to help us accomplish that? And I think sometimes where things get a little bit tricky and dangerous is people start to look at tech as this element of like, this is our savior, this is what's going to like make everything better, it's going to be the cash cow, it's going to save us all this money, it's going to be able to bring people in, it's going to help us limit the support we need from the human side. But in reality, I feel that tech is actually just better preparing and better serving not only the customer but also my internal team, my human team members, so that they can do their jobs more efficiently. So I think you have to look at them together, not separately.
Yeah, 100. I couldn't agree more. It goes hand in hand, and I think having that ethos of like something you've said to me, tech built with the humanity at the center of it. It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? And in your answer, tech can actually amplify that human experience. I'm curious if you have like an example of how you've managed to achieve that, or just like a tactical or strategic way that comes to life for you. I know it's early at OneSkin, but maybe an example from the past that brings it out.
No, and I think, and not even necessarily an example of from the past, but when I think about like what you just said, right? Like tech having that humanity at the center. And it's like, even going back further, right? Like, let's say I have company X and we make phone cases. And I can start customer service there and write these beautiful macros and all of these things, and they can sound really gushy and flowery. But if my policy is you have a subscription for my phone case, but there's no way you can cancel it easily,
Yeah,
that's just maybe not a great policy. So it doesn't matter if I throw tech at the problem or people at the problem, because the tech is just going to serve, hey, you can't cancel this, right? Like there's all these terms and conditions around this. So for me, it's like we also have to look at the human element of what are we trying to do here? Does this actually serve the customer? And that's the question that I ask, is at the heart of every single thing I do. Does this make it easier for the customer? And for me, part of the element of that is my team and what my team is able to do. I talk about this a lot. Everyone hates answering Wizmo questions. Where is my order? If you raise your hand right now and you tell me you like answering them, I would love to talk because I want to learn more about that, because we're all different. But I can't imagine that there's anyone out there that as a human being likes to be like, yes, your order, da 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 da. So one element in which I have really leveraged tech is for those Wizmo questions, because number one, there is an effort in your customer reaching out just to ask where their order is, just to track their order. So if you can catch that before they even have to reach out to you, it is better for them at the end of the day. And I think that's where the central question and like the thought process has to be is around the fact that what is best for your customer, what's easiest. And it naturally will start to go hand in hand in the fact that your team members will start to be able to use, their own individual personalities and skill sets to really tackle more complicated questions within support.
For sure. And I think unbelievably well said. And there's so many things I'd love to follow up on there. Something that actually really stood out to me was tech can answer questions. It can recognize questions, but if there's not a good answer, that's not actually going to make your customer happier. Some of that is maybe a policy, maybe you have a say in, but some of that's just like the problems of the product of the company are falling at your feet, and
Yeah.
you need a way to solve them. So I'm curious, how maybe do you have like a recurring way to see where things are broken that aren't tech related, but it's actually just bad policy, or like the product's not working the way? And how do you communicate that across the organization to make sure that you are solving those problems for your customers? And as a leader, I know that's probably something that's super important for you, to not just get stuck in your customer success world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, tracking trends is top of mind
Mhm.
100%. And I think also like AI is also doing this besides just responding. AI is tracking trends,
Mhm.
sentiment, tagging, all of that in ways that like 10 years ago, I would have sold my soul to be able to do some of the things that are just so easy to do now. And it's so impressive. And for me, I like that is where I first started to utilize AI and tech within
Mhm.
support, was to serve trends and to test out whether or not it was serving those accurately. And I feel confident that I can say, yes, that
Yep.
is happening. And with that, looking through what these trends are. So what are people saying, right? So like if we have a in shipping, we have 150 complaints that one of the refill pouches burst, let's say, right? This has never happened. Hopefully it doesn't, knock on wood. But let's say it did, right? That trend starting to be, leveraged to the surface. And look, if you don't have tech and AI in place, doesn't matter. Depending on what you're using, you can still get that information and, manually flip through and figure out where those trends are, right? So in general, paying attention to what that is. Once I have that information, I usually like to do a diagnosis of what the problem could be. Maybe it's 10 different things: manufacturing, it's happening during shipping, it's user error, right? And really look through how many of those I can map to what the possible problem could be. And something that, again, I'm so grateful that tech and AI has done for me is one of the current tools I'm using can do that automatically.
Yeah.
And there's so much power in me not having to sift through a Google sheet. Like I think we all know what that's like. And being able to have that information, then that leads to the next part, right? Which is once you have that info, how do you serve that information to the rest of the team? And we could probably have a whole interview series about what I'm about to say next, but outside of support, you get asked these questions like, well, what's the dollar value attributed to that problem? Okay, well, this isn't logistics and ops. That's a much more complicated question. So for me, it's about getting creative in how you serve. Hey, this is a problem, but also saying, hey, I already am thinking through a solution, but remembering your audience, who you're talking to, and just being really creative about the way you bring those things up.
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't have a solution. Sometimes you have to be like, hey, I need help with this. This is seriously a problem. Help me out.
Yeah. Hopefully that happens as little as possible. I love that
Yeah.
how you focus. Something we are, very cognizant of is, AI is in our DNA, but there's a right way and a wrong way to leverage AI and customer service at the moment. And trends and recognizing trends is one of those, the right now, the most powerful ways. So I love that you're
I
honing
100% think so.
already. Yeah, gone are the days of manual tagging of tickets and sorting that way, for sure. So to bring it to the tech stack explicitly, it's,
Mhm.
I think everyone knows it's really hard to implement or to take a step back to even evaluate, implement tech. It's expensive. The lift
Yeah.
to get it up and running and actually provide the value that's usually sold is usually higher than expected. So I'm wondering, as a leader, and you've already talked about, putting humanity at the center, tech that works with humanity. these decisions are black and white though. It's either yes, we're going to do this tech, or no, we're not. And you have to come to that final decision. How do you approach it from this lens of being able to balance and what you're trying to achieve with your team and customer care?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I feel like, without, being too long-winded, where I usually start is even before I get to the tech stack, because the other thing is, like, we all know each other in the space, so we know about different tools. We maybe use them in the past. We have preferences. I call that unconscious bias, right? Like, and sometimes it is conscious bias. So what I like to do is just try to, like, and completely scrap that thought process, and first do an audit of not only support, but anything that is, what I like to call the tentacles around support, which is generally pretty much all aspects of the company, but specifically talking through like logistics, marketing. And so as I'm auditing that, I'm identifying holes and I'm listing out the holes in the process. And once I have that, then it's really easy for me to be like, oh, okay, here's my list of 5 services that I know will fill this hole. And once I have that list, again becomes way easier to see, okay, does this work? Does this fit here? But more than that, I go back to the question of, does this actually serve the customer? For me, service is at the center of everything. And I think sometimes, of course, we have KPIs, we have metrics, we're a business. There are things that we need to do and things that we want to do to be able to go further. But I think sometimes it's like we get lost in the sauce of, how do I limit my cost per ticket X, Y, and Z? And we're not asking the question of, does implementing this tool actually help the customer? It could be great. It could save me a ton of money on the back end. It could totally limit that cost per ticket. But then when actually put out into reality, it's too clunky for the customer. The customer's struggling to actually use it. It's not getting them anywhere. It's not better for them. So that is the question for me that is always top of mind from a service perspective, is, will this actually make it easier for them to accomplish what they need to accomplish? Whether that's outreach, whether that's tracking their order, returning their order, whatever it is. If the answer is no, I don't care how much money it's going to save, goodbye. I don't care how cool it is, goodbye. It's not going to work. It doesn't mean it won't work for someone else, but it's not going to work in this instance for me. And from there, I continue to go down the line and ask those same questions. And eventually you get to this point where you're like, okay, I'm really at a good place. Something that Brianna Moreno, who I know has been on with you before, from True Classic, I love that she does this. She audits everything in support every single year. And that is another thing. My best advice is, whether it's tools, macros, policy, anything, look at it, and look at it constantly to make sure that it still makes sense. And to me, it's the same thing for onboarding tools.
Yeah. You beat me to the punch. I was gonna ask you, you talked about this regularly reviewing. So I think that's a super insightful thing. It's like every year, take a look at what you're doing, evaluate, is there some place that we can improve? Think we should do more of. I think that's super important. I was taking notes there, as I have to remember this, put the customer first, and I got my marketing hat on. But I think what you said, the lens of framing a tech evaluation, of putting the customer first, will this actually help make customers happy with care? It seems so simple, but when you're evaluating tech, it's very easy to just think, how is this going to improve my life? How is this going to improve my agent's life? Not how is this going to help my customers be happier. So I just love the way you frame that and the way you're thinking about it. I think that's a great insight. Somewhat related, but do you try to tie this to like one specific metric? Do you boil it down to something you measure? Is it something as simple as like, will this help my CSAT score? Is there another way you frame that? Because again, going to that black and white, yes or no, are we going to do this? Or is it more just like you evaluate everything and it's kind of your gut feel at the end of the day? Will it help?
That's a really good question. And, as the late and great Tony Hsieh said, it's not rocket science, it's happiness science. And I've always loved that line. And for me, like, happy agents are happy customers, right? So the ease of use for the agents too is a huge part of it. But it really does come down to it being that simple, ease of use, right? Like, how easy is it for them to actually get what they need? And that, like I said before, like, that really is it. that's where I start. And then everything else kind of comes into play. You're right. Like, will it positively impact CSAT or NPS, right? Those are questions. Does it make sense financially? It's not that I'm ignoring those questions. It's just that those come later for me
Mm,
down the line, because if that blocker is always right, like that's my North Star is service. So
gotcha.
if that North Star is there, it has to break that barrier first, and then we can kind of go into the rest of it. But I think CSAT, NPS are huge for me. When I say that, what I really mean is feedback loops, constantly and obsessively talking to our customers and asking them and finding out where the holes are, because they'll tell you. If you ask
Mm.
them, sometimes you have to incentivize, sometimes you don't. If you ask them, they're going to tell you, and that's the quickest way to just get changes implemented.
Gotcha. And makes total sense. And we did get one question just right off that, so maybe we can answer
Mhm.
it quickly. Do you measure AES, agent effort score, at all?
We don't currently, but I have in the past, and I would say that that is something we definitely will be monitoring.
Mhm,
And I think it is something that is important.
mhm. Gotcha. And yeah, maybe I think that's actually a good jumping off point. Bringing it now to your current role, which you're new in, and
Yeah.
you talked about this constant evaluation. You're doing a foundational build at OneSkin. How are you approaching this? Like, where are you starting, and how are you going to balance this tech and humanity moving forward in a new role? Yeah.
With a giant smile on my face. No. So from a foundational perspective, I mean, for me, it all really starts at help desk.
Mm,
And there are things that outside of that, I think that I would consider foundational that maybe other people don't, right? Like the ease of reporting on what we just talked about,
mm,
tagging,
yeah.
sentiment, all of that. To me, that is very foundational. That is something that I need in order to really, for me, optimize success, right? So it's outlining those places where there are holes. Like I feel like I can say this. So for OneSkin, for example, um, we don't have a returns process that's easy for our customers. So for me, I was like, that's really low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I start to like weigh things is, okay, this will take 5 seconds to implement. This will take 40 hours.
Mm,
Let's start to lay out those things, right? If something is like the 2-minute rule, right? If I can get it done in 2 minutes, do it now.
yeah.
That's what I start to look at from that foundational perspective to start to build. And then I have time. I've already accomplished XYZ. I have time to really look at some of these longer standing foundational elements. Um, but going back, like help desk is really one. Um, People process. So the team, how is the team operating with each other? How are they gaining information? How are they asking questions? How's the internal feedback, right? Because I mean, talking about agent effort score, also like employee scoring, like how easy is it for them to do their actual jobs? Like it sounds really simple, but I find that sometimes when I come into new companies, they're just not talking. They're not asking questions. They're not engaged because either there's a fear or there's something going on there, or they've just never been able to have that kind of channel in the past.
Yeah. And that's I think again, so well said. Someone's also come into organizations and tried to build a function. It's like identifying where people aren't talking. It's hard to uncover that because no one's talking, right? It's like how do you dig that up, quickly? And I think super helpful information for anyone who is stepping into a new role. And so you've talked about constant evaluation, this full audit. Will this like manifest itself in any way specifically? Like, is it 3 months in, 4 months, you'll have this presentation that you'll do to leadership, or you'll share your findings with your team? Is there like a hard thing that you'll take away after your first 30, 60, 90 days and start to execute? Or is it just constantly identifying problems and figuring out what you're going to work on next?
That's a great question. So I did the audit like within the first 2 weeks that I was here, and then I gave
Did it
myself
quick.
some time. I know, so to take some time after that audit to be like, okay, let me make sure that my instincts were right. Once I did that, I passed that audit to them, and I was like, here are the areas, right? And I did separate it by area, so it's easy to digest. Here are the things we need to do, but I didn't specifically say this tool is going to solve this problem. I just outlined the problem, and then I outlined what's the budget. And then once I had those two things and they agreed, they were like, oh, like this, and this, I split it up into quarters in the way that I thought would be most beneficial and also secure success for the company for the next year. I said, we need to accomplish this in Q1. So, for example, having a more robust CSAT, NPS, AES. This was obviously, I love the question about AES. Mm-hmm. Having all of that in one place was like, boom, we got to do this. Implementing a return system, that was all Q1. And then we'll continue to go through and easily work through all of these different elements. So I've already done the heavy lifting. Now it's just going to be going back each quarter and being like, okay, now we're talking about AI. Here are my different options. Let's look at it. And I can implement that really quickly because we've already done the audit.
Yeah. And I think I love the way you've structured your work. I think it's really smart because it's like the hard work is that strategy part and answering those tough questions around what fits where, how are we going to measure, like ladder our work up to the goals we need to hit. And then once you do that hard work and you feel good about a plan, it's just execution, which is the easier part. So I like how you're approaching that. And I think we have time for one or two more questions. So we're going to move us along. And we already talked, you already mentioned it, AI, ChatGPT-3, obviously huge buzzwords at the moment.
Yeah. People
have lots of questions. I'm just, your general thoughts on automation as a part of your strategy. Again, do you think, I'll just give you all the questions at once. How do you think this is going to impact the role of the CS agent and their lives? And then, again, knowing that it really appears like a lot of organizations are moving in this direction. They're figuring out what role AI is going to play. It sounds like you're doing the same. How are you going to ensure that humanity stays a part of the care you're delivering? So a lot for you to dig into there.
No, absolutely. All really, really good questions with a lot of substance. I mean, I think that there are a lot of polarizing views out there right now when it comes to like tech and AI. I think there are people who are like super anti, and then there are people that are super pro. But I think it really lands somewhere in the middle, at least for me, right? Like we can all have different ideas and opinions, of course. But for me, I feel like we have to land somewhere in the middle. First of all, let's just call it what it is. ChatGPT is super fun. Like you can be afraid of it or not like it as much as you want, but it's super fun. And that's the other thing is like, for me, and I think for a lot of us out there, support is really fun. And we don't have to sacrifice testing and playing and having fun just because something's new. So for me, that's the first part is I'm not afraid to play with new technology. I'm down to do it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's fine. Who cares? It's not going to, blow anything up. From there, I think because I'm thinking about service as that kind of North Star and that centrality, it's in every conversation I have, everything that I do. My team knows it. Which leads, into this really beautiful space from a people perspective where, I love when my team comes to me and they're like, hey, I know we don't do this. Like, this isn't something we normally do, but I feel really strongly about this customer. I want to do this for them. Is it okay? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That's because we have service at the central core of our business and of our department and our team and our family. So from there, when we're looking at tech, it's easy to me. Like it comes easy because I'm looking at it through that lens. Yeah. And I don't think we have to throw tech at 100% of our problems.
Yeah.
Like I think sometimes I see it's like implement it. And then if the customer doesn't understand, just route them to support. I think you start small. Let's test. Okay. Someone's asking, where's my order? Let's test automation for all of those based on these keywords, based on this intelligent tracking, and insert an answer. And let's see how it does. It was successful. Let's move forward. I think it's little bites and little stages, and it has to work for you. Every support organization is different. Every leader is different. So another piece of advice I would give is don't just do something because someone else did it.
Yeah.
Try it out, do it, message other leaders on LinkedIn. That's what I do. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like start to have those conversations so that, because it really is a community and we're all, like you said, trying to do this at the same time.
Yeah. Again, so well said. And one theme that had, I think, been throughout this conversation that I feel like we leave the audience with is like, all this is with the lens of through the customer. And I love that you just don't lose track of that. It's, if you're ever struggling to make a decision on what to do, just like take a step back and put it in that framework. And then I think what you just said right at the end is like, just because something is right for someone else does not mean it's right for you. And when you go into evaluate, you look at tools, it's like, make sure that it fits your business, your company, and how you want to deliver care to your customers. I think that's super important. We are running up on time. I have one last question for you very quickly.
Yeah.
Bonus question. So what are you most excited about in 2023, whether it be something in customer service, something more broadly, or trend you anticipate that's going to be really exciting? I want to, as a leader, I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
I'm excited about a lot of things because I'm generally a very excited person, but I'm really excited about ChatGPT. I don't think that it's going to replace humans personally. I think that it's so fun to play with. I mean, we've already seen, like, looking at writing blog posts or prompting. Like, I did a test to see how it would write my macros. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to see the different ways that people are going to utilize not just ChatGPT, but AI and tech. And expanding on that a little bit, when we were talking about, when I was talking about earlier, if a customer reaches out because they want to know where their order is and we're implementing automation, right now, that automation for us, there are tools out there, is only based on keyword. So there's a lot of errors. I'm interested to see, and I know this year we're going to get so much further, how AI and technology is picking up on the true root of a problem. Meaning, not just I'm saying, where's my order, but when that customer comes back and says, oh, also this broke in transit. Because right now, some automation is missing that secondary piece. And so I'm really interested to see just how far we can get on robust answering within AI environments.
Yeah. I would echo the excitement. We're very excited as well. We had a whole webinar about it. Obviously AI is at the core. We have very passionate opinions on where it should be. I would say you're absolutely right. GPT is very fun. Everyone should go play with it. We don't think it will replace agents, but it will. I think the technology has so much application to elevate the role of customer service and the care we're doing. So I think there's a lot of exciting things to come, and can't wait to see where it goes. And with that, we are over time already. And I want to be cognizant of everyone's time and thank everyone for joining us. Jessica, this was an amazing conversation.
So fun. Thank you.
So many actionable insights. I feel like we could have talked for another half hour, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. You guys are the best.
Yeah. Okay. We'll wrap there. Everyone, take care. Have a wonderful rest of the day and week.